All right, we'll start with a little housekeeping. Brenna's going to drop into the chat our note catcher for our time together today. I'd like to introduce myself to you. My name is Mandy Hawker, and I am the Elementary ELA Education Associate in the Office of Assessment and Standards. I'm super excited to work with you all this morning to talk about the research strand and how we can support that in our elementary classrooms. Along with me this morning, I have Brenna McCormick, who is our middle level education associate for ELA Standards, and she will be navigating all of the technical side. So if you have questions in the chat, if you need a link, Brenna is who you can reach out to, and she will be there to support you. So we're excited to work with you today. Now, today your note catcher will also serve as your resource landing page. All of the resources that you're going to need throughout our presentation today are linked in that note catcher. Brenna's dropped that link a couple times into the chat. And if you will go ahead and open that up, because you will be accessing lots of hyperlinks that are attached to that note catcher. There'll be articles and resources, surveys, all linked into the note catcher. So it's super essential that you get a copy of that and have it throughout our presentation today. Additionally, there will be 2 opportunities for breakout rooms in our time together today. We understand connectivity issues and working through some of that with our breakout rooms, but we really hope that you will take that time to engage with people across the state and use this valuable experience to relate to others throughout the state in regard to our research strand. And then finally, we also want to always state that everything that we share today, any resources, suggestions, activities, is always to be used in support of your high quality instructional materials. And those are those adopted textbooks that you have in your classrooms. We'll be taking a look at some of those today and some of those resources and how we might infuse our research standards and indicators within those. So that'll be a fun experience too. As always, for our webinars, we are offering recertification credit today. So for every hour that you attend a webinar, you receive recertification credit, and that requires live attendance and participation. So jumping in the chat and responding to us, unmuting as you feel comfortable, and sharing out. Remaining in attendance for the duration of our time together. And then finally, completing that feedback survey so that we can capture your email to send you that recertification certificate. So we're excited to be able to offer that. Now let's jump into today's purpose. Why are we here? Our purpose today is to understand the content and rigor expectations for research for our elementary students. We want to develop and provide standards-based instruction using our high-quality instructional materials and evidence-based practices. Now, to me, that sounds like a whole lot of educator lingo. What I'd like for you to do on box 1 of your note catcher is take a second to just deconstruct that statement and pull out what's important to you from our purpose today. 180 of you signed up for today's session. So why did you decide to come to a session on research? Why is it important? Go ahead and write that in your note catcher. And then if you feel comfortable, drop that in the chat as well. Awesome. I love seeing that you are here for the resources, and you'll be happy to know, Christy, that we have some micro, mini, and macros for you to support research. Those are always my favorite. Good. Yes. It's supporting research strategies, kindergarten through 5th grade, having that vertical articulation of those. And then supporting the library with research. Yes, Kim, so often we do see a lot of those projects and a lot of those skills live in the library classroom. So I'm glad you see that connection as well. All right, well, let's get started and dig into our content. Keep dropping that in the chat just to let us know your expectations for today and how we can support you in this presentation. So the first thing we'd like for you to do is take a look at box 2 of your note catcher. Actually includes our sketch notes document. So if you will open up the link on box 2 of your note catcher, you'll see an infographic, and I will pull it up right over here on our screen so we can all see it. It should look something like this. I'd like for you to explore this document and respond to those questions on your note catcher. As you review that infographic or that sketch notes document, I want you to drop into the chat. Do you agree with the expectations outlined for kindergarten through second grade and 3 through 5? Do you disagree? And how do you see this in the classrooms that you support? Amanda, I love your comment about the emphasis on questioning. Yes, we see a huge emphasis on questioning in our K through 2 band especially. And I think that's because naturally our students are so curious in the early grades, right? They already ask tons of questions, and it's our job in guiding them in research to have them ask the appropriate questions or ask questions that could narrow or broaden their research skills. Very good. And I agree with you too, Tina. Yes. So the expectations outlined in this sketch notes definitely promotes higher order thinking. And we see a lot of connections to the profile of the South Carolina graduate. They're developing those higher order thinking skills that we anticipate they'll exit their K through 12 education with. So I don't see anybody disagreeing with what research can look like in K through 2 or 3 through 5. That's good. Now, I do have a question. Did this information look similar to anything else you've read from the State Department before? Tabitha, you may have an upper hand at answering this question because this information actually was developed. This sketch notes infographic was developed based on the research support document. So in the research support document, these expectations are outlined for our elementary students. But we just kind of turned it into a more interesting way of looking at it and a visual that can support teachers as they're planning research instruction in their classrooms. So I hope you like this resource, and I hope you're able to use it to support collaborative discussions at your grade level, or especially within your school. Maybe if you include some of those content area specialists as well. We're going to dig into our agenda. Here's what our day looks like so far. We will be doing an overview of research. We'll be exploring those indicator expectations. Then we'll look at some instructional practices. Finally, end with clarity and closure. So first, let's dig into our ELA standards. If you've been with us any time before, you've seen this slide, right? So here are the 4 strands of our ELA standards. We know that research is its own standalone strand. Now, this is a transformation of sorts from our 2015 standards, where research was titled inquiry, and it was used a little differently as well. So that has been quite a shift for us as educators. And because of that shift, we want to really calibrate our base knowledge around research. Now, here is where we're going to be using the quotes. On box 3 of your note catcher, you'll notice an extensive list of quotes related to research. Now, these quotes represent a variety of audiences and perspectives. Some of these quotes are even from our ELA standards document in the explanation of strand section. What we'd like for you to do now in box 3 of your note catcher is read the quotes, see what you agree with, see what you don't, and then write how you would define research. Then, based on that reading and based on what you write, describe what research would look like and sound like in an elementary classroom. And I'm interested to hear, especially from our librarians in attendance, what it might look like and sound like. And then finally, defend. Why, according to the quotes or your own personal convictions, is it necessary to teach research skills to students? I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to do this activity. You'll read the quotes and then do your define, describe, and defend. Go ahead and get busy. As you complete your define, describe, and defend, feel free to drop your thoughts in the chat, or if you feel comfortable, come off mute and share what resonated with you from these quotes.
As I was reading those and thinking about them in my defend box, I ended up writing things about our goal, or my goal at least, is to help our kids become knowledge-seeking citizens with a critical eye and a critical ear, not to believe everything that they read, not to believe everything that they hear, and to always wonder, and to seek information from more than one source. So I think that that's so important that we teach them that while they're here with us, because ultimately I want them to be able to do that as a productive citizen in society. So that's what I was thinking about as I was working on this.
I appreciate that. And I think that that is well articulated in the indicators when we look at those. But that's our purpose. Our purpose is to create that investigative nature, and the skills to do it. It's not natural, right? Yeah, I love it. And I love seeing your responses in the chat. Kelly, AI, let me tell you, I am on a journey to learn more about that right now. That's such an unknown for us, because how will our skills have to be different for research in order to utilize the power of AI? I think somebody that has a better grasp on that than me is Brenna. She's done a lot of work in her doctorate, using AI to support her as like a thinking partner. Brenna, do you want to speak on that any?
Trying to unmute myself. I'll just say that I think, this is Brenna McCormick personally thinking, that AI is a tool that we have to teach students to use responsibly and ethically. And it's not going anywhere, and we can't be naive about that. So I think that I don't think we're going to be taking any core skills away from our students by teaching them how to use just another tool in their toolbox. So it's definitely something that I hope that our state will really get behind and support in equipping our teachers and our students to use.
Thank you for sharing that. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry, I'm severely stopped up. I think you're absolutely right. It's a phenomenal tool. However, even I was the victim of an AI article yesterday. And when I thought about research, and which is one of the reasons I really wanted to hear this webinar, I thought, if even I couldn't distinguish what was fact and what wasn't, do I feel equipped to facilitate the learning of my students with AI tools? And so I think that's something we definitely have to consider, and we also have to really come up with a plan for what that will look like, because distinguishing fact and fiction for students is a huge problem, especially when everything that they get is from social media. And as a teacher and somebody who's worked with students, that's what I've seen. I'm sure everybody on here probably has a story very similar, but I think that we definitely need to really come up with a plan for that, and be uniform in that.
And Kelly, I
Because as
think
we
that
know, if we don't learn it, they're going to surpass us very quickly.
Oh, for sure.
yes,
Yeah.
And I think Kelly's comment goes back to Christy's comment about multiple sources, and teaching students to really verify, which is, they see it, it's published, it must be the gospel. So again, it's all about teaching students the skills. This is just another skill that needs to be in our students and teachers' repertoires.
Awesome. Thank y'all for that engagement. And I think it's always so good to hear from different voices. So I really appreciate y'all speaking into the silence. All right, let's take a look at the definition of research from our glossary. So we have our glossary for the 2024 ELA standards. Here's what the definition of research is. What draws your attention in this definition? How does this align with some of your define, describe, defend? For me, what jumps out is that it talks about a process. That this is, and I loved one of the quotes talking about that research is recursive and continual. So if that is true, and this is a process, then this is something that we will enter into over and over and over across the 180 days that our students are sitting in our classrooms, right? It's not that one project that's just the culminating activity that we do. So often I fell into that trap for planning issues and time that I had to support research. So that's a redo I would do if I had the opportunity to go back to the classroom. But I also love that this quote includes coming to new conclusions. So they're synthesizing that information that they've researched, but also satisfying curiosity, which gets to the heart of that early childhood nature, where children innately have that curiosity. And like Albert Einstein said, how can we foster that instead of barely letting it survive a formal education? Okay, now let's take a look at our research strand and the indicators that fall below it. So there are 5 indicators that support research. The first is investigating and refining knowledge. The code for that is ELA R1.1, and it applies to kindergarten through 5th grade. This is where a lot of your questioning and curiosity lives. The next indicator is our credibility indicator. This enters the expectations in 2nd through 5th grade for elementary level. And it is defined by R1.2 as its code. Our next indicator is on relevance. It is R1.3, and it enters in 4th and 5th grade. And then we have synthesis, and it is R1.4. It applies to just 4th and 5th grade as well. And then citation is R1.5, and it applies to 4th and 5th grade. Now, obviously, all of these research indicators apply 6th grade through English 4. But what's interesting here is when they enter the expectations at the elementary level. Taking a look at that, that is because of developmental appropriateness. Does anybody agree that maybe citation, synthesis, and relevance are not developmentally appropriate at the kindergarten level? Well, yes. I think that synthesizing is one of those high cognitive functions that we definitely see at the upper grades. The same with credibility. In kindergarten and 1st grade, it's difficult for students to know if a source is credible or not. We can foster some of that. We can initiate some of those discussions at the kindergarten and 1st grade level, but an expectation of having a competency in that at an indicator level is not developmentally appropriate. So just a little explanation of why it's designed that way. Okay, we also have a research support document. I referenced this earlier. The infographic sketch notes that you experienced in our second activity today, it was derived from our research support document. So Brenna just dropped that in the chat. I think it's also linked on your note catcher. But this research support document contains just some insights for each of those 5 indicators in what research may look like at your grade band or grade level. So take a moment, and I want you just to open up the document and look over it. You may have already explored this document. You may already know what's in it, but look and see what is included in this resource that might be applicable to you. And then we'd like for you to engage. Consider areas of strength or areas of growth in relation to this document. What are areas in this document that you're like, I already know this, we do this, I have this knowledge? Or is there a space in this research support document that could inform your practice? Maybe this is an area of instruction that's weak for you in regard to research that you could support. How might you use this resource to support planning and instruction? I'll give you about 4 minutes to explore the research support document. Christine and Jennifer, I love your comments about the calibration of language that this document supports. Yes, there's lots of definitions and vocabulary included in this document, and I think that it helps us to all use the same language for our students, K through 5, and even in our special areas. And so often schools that have maybe a STEM lab or some kind of builders or makerspace where they do research in different areas, they'll use the language from our research standards and the research support document so that everybody's calibrated and we're all talking the same code to our students, right? It only makes the access to learning easier for our students. Now, another thing that I saw in the chat was the use of the questioning. Yes, Tina, the types of questions mentioned that support like broadening or refining the scope of research, those are so helpful. I would have loved to have had some of those question stems and question types when I was in the classroom. I think that would have helped me, especially when you are in a whole group lesson with a bunch of kindergarten through second graders who have all the questions, and some are calibrated, some are not. And so just kind of helping guide our students through the research process and developing and honing those skills. So some of our takeaways from the research support document, yes, are the types of questions that are supported in the document. Also the support for evaluating sources. This gives a very clear and aligned language for how you can support students in their evaluating of sources. The citing of sources is also referenced there, where we often see a lot of questions come up about, do we use MLA or APA? Bonus points if anybody has the answer to that question and can put that in the chat. I'll come back to that, but refining the scope of inquiry, having those terms and definitions to calibrate our language. And then I love the part where it outlines potential grade level expectations, so that we all have the same understanding of what our students should or should not be able to do. For the answer about the citation, there is no one formally accepted citation format in South Carolina. So that was a trick question. Sorry to trick you all, but no, MLA or APA is not prescribed by the state. That's a district or a school or a teacher decision. But the most important skill is knowing how to cite, and knowing that you must cite your sources to avoid plagiarism, right? All right, so some ways that we may find to use the research support document is to align our instruction to the standards, obviously. We can identify the key skills and strategies that we need to use to support research. We can incorporate best practices, differentiating our instruction. Based on those grade band suggestions, we can kind of determine how we can shift or scaffold our instruction to meet the needs of our students. But then also we can monitor our progress and assess learning by using this document. So I hope that you found the research support document as helpful as we have found it. But that brings us to the end of our first section together. So did you expect to start this morning with so much research? In the past 32 minutes, you have researched quotes and an infographic. You've researched a whole entire support document. So you've encountered a lot of sources. What we'd like for you to do is to synthesize some of that research and tell us one smart thing that you learned in this first section. What is one statement that connects with the information that we have explored this morning so far in the past 32 minutes? Okay, I see a lot of great takeaways. Thank you for giving me just a minute to read through the chat. Janice, I love your takeaway that 4th and 5th grade is heavy. Yes, 4th and 5th grade teachers, you lucky ducks, y'all just get it all added, don't you? So that is a great takeaway. But I see a lot of really good engagement with the resources this morning. So look at you synthesizing your research and telling me what you've taken away. A skill you could, or a strategy you could apply with your students. So hopefully you can take that away as well. All right, let's move into part 2. We're going to take a closer look at some indicator expectations. If you have been with us any length of time, you've seen this. This is our vertical progression. This is in Appendix B of our standards document, and it is a kindergarten through English for articulation of our standards. So for research, it does look a little different. Okay. Now, as always with our vertical progression, any new content or skills is going to be in bold. So you'll notice that. But for our research vertical progression, it's organized differently in that all 5 of the research indicators are chunked together by grade band. So if you look at this example here, you see English 2 at the bottom and R 1.1 through 1.4, and I think 1.5 goes on to the next page. But then we look at English 3 has R 1.1 all the way through 1.5. So they're chunked a little differently than how we typically see a vertical progression. This is because research is viewed as a process, right? And all of these skills really build on one another and can be bundled in that way. Now, that's not to say that they're not all explicit skills that can be practiced separately, but we wanted you to have that visual of how they might look if they were all put together as that full research process. Now, we're going to use this document in just a few minutes. So Brenna has dropped the link in the chat. Make sure you open that up and have it so that you can utilize this as we move into our next section. We're going to talk through now our grade level breakdowns. So if you've been with us before, you may have also seen our grade level breakdowns. This is where we do a needs, guarantees, key terms, and then impacts on planning and instruction. So this 4-part graphic organizer includes a box that are needs. Now that articulates what you need your students to come into the grade level that you support with. What do they need to have as they come into 5th grade, right? Now, the guarantees would be what you teach and what you ensure your students or guarantee your students will leave your classrooms with. That would be based on your grade level indicators. What can you guarantee you will teach them for your grade level? For key terms, that might indicate any of your bolded terms that you see in the indicators that would be new for your grade level, or it may just be language that you need to ensure that the teachers that you are working with are calibrated on, right? Like one term that we often see a need for calibration on is claim or perspective. Those are big, heavy terms in our ELA standards that we often have to go back to the glossary with. So what key terms do you see in your grade level indicators that you need to make sure are defined? And then finally, what impacts on planning or instruction might your grade level indicators have? So what's important for teachers to know at this level? What could student success look like? And how might teachers formatively assess the indicators for research at this level? So I'm going to show you an example of what this might look like for 4th grade. For 4th grade, I need my students to come in to my grade level asking and answering questions. I need them to be able to narrow and broaden their thinking based on those questions, and I need them to be able to kind of group the findings of their research together. Now, for me as a 4th grade teacher, again, my heart goes out to you all. There's a lot of things I'm going to guarantee as a 4th grade teacher when you leave my classroom. First, you'll be able to conduct short research. Next, that you'll be able to generate your own questions, that you will be able to examine sources, that you can determine the credibility and relevance of those sources, that you'll be able to group findings from your research, and that you'll cite sources to avoid plagiarism. 4th grade, you got your work cut out for you, don't you? Now let's look, what key terms would I need to have defined for me or ensure my students know at 4th grade level? Well, research, topic, provided source, credibility, relevance, findings, all of those need to be defined for my students. And I need to make sure that I have an understanding of those terms as a teacher so that I can deliver that instruction appropriately. So then finally, we'll take a look at what implications this might have for planning and instruction. Well, first, I need to know the definitions of the terms. Something else that I need to recognize as a fourth grade teacher is that I am adding in indicators that were not there for third grade in regard to relevance, synthesis, and citation. If those are brand new indicators, then I need to do a lot of work supporting my students' acquisition of those skills. And then I need to do a big inventory of what instructional resources I have to support teaching credible and credibility and relevance of sources. Is that in my instructional material? Is that something I'm going to have as an outside source? Is this somewhere I'm going to need to lean in and calibrate with my librarian to help me find credible and relevant sources? So those are just some impacts that I think the fourth grade indicator may have on my instruction. All right, again, we're going to take a look at this breakdown. And what we're going to do is we're going to send you to breakout rooms. You'll either be in the kindergarten through fifth grade room. It will say the name of your room up at the top. And we'd like for you to complete the grade level breakdown. Now, this is all linked on your note catcher. So your grade level breakdown document, I'll go ahead and show you where that is. If you scroll down, here is it. It's number 7. It's called Needs and Guarantees. If you click on the kindergarten document, everybody in the kindergarten room can write in on this document. The indicator is already linked for you, so you're good to go. Same thing with fifth grade. Fifth grade, indicators are there. Everybody in your group can type into your document. Okay. One more thing, you'll notice on your note catcher that the fourth grade is yellowed out. That's because I just did it for you, right? However, fourth grade, we're still going to let you have a group in a room to go to do the grade level breakdown, but I want you to see if you can come up with anything different for your grade level breakdown than what I showed you. And no cheating. Don't go back in the slides and look at mine. Try to come up with your own. I think doing this process is really helpful for us to deconstruct some of these standards and indicators. All right, Brenna, are you ready? All right, Brenna's going to send you to breakout rooms. I am so impressed with the amount of work you were able to get done during that short time. Thank you. I've been eavesdropping on your needs and guarantees documents, and I've seen some really insightful findings being put in there especially about the impacts on planning and instruction and the time that it takes to teach students these specific skills related to research. So I appreciate that. I hope that you found value in using this needs and guarantees deconstruction method for looking at these indicators, and you were kind of able to really calibrate exactly what the expectations were for your grade level indicators. So I appreciate you engaging in that expectation. Now, just taking a look at our findings, it's truly a repeat of the information that you just had. So I want to start with kindergarten. Let's take a look. The biggest expectation for kindergarten is that you are asking and answering questions. Now, my kindergarten group, does anybody want to add anything or say anything more about the expectations for research in kindergarten? Anybody from a kindergarten room want to speak?
I'll speak. I wanted to make sure that I had clarification. I just feel a little foggy headed today, so excuse me, but sometimes I can be a bit of an overachiever. And I'm looking at the vocabulary and the key terms. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the key terms for just that indicator, right? Because when I open up the vocabulary, there's so many things that you could include with print
Absolutely.
and non-print, right? Like the
Right,
author's
right.
purpose and characters
No.
and things. Okay.
Just what's relevant to that indicator. So author's purpose may not apply just to that indicator, right?
Right.
But the author, absolutely, because, if we're looking at the source, we may need to look
Right.
at that. But some of the key terms that I'm thinking that jumped out to me from the kindergarten indicator were print and non-print sources.
Uh-huh.
So calibrating our understanding of what those are. And I see that as one of your guarantees on your thinking tracker.
Right.
What are print and non-print sources? Now, this is important because print and non-print sources appears in indicator language kindergarten through 3rd grade.
Right.
So if I'm teaching that kindergarten expectation on print and non-print sources, I want to make sure my language is calibrated with the expectations of all of those other grade levels. So,
and we talked about some examples of that, right? Like what that would look like and what we needed to make sure that the students understood.
yes. Awesome. Very good. So that would be definitely a place for you to lean in that kindergarten grade band or that kindergarten grade level.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Now, my 1st grade friends. Oh, anything else? Okay, my 1st grade friends. For me, again, the focus on that grade level is really asking and answering questions. But what else did you find from your needs and guarantees experience? Anybody want to speak out?
We looked at making sure that students can generate questions, and we talked about when we're having a turn and talk, ask your students to ask a question, answer a question regarding to the text.
I love that. Yes, not just answering questions, which is definitely the lean that we go to. That's our bend as teachers. You read a text, you answer questions about it, but asking questions and generating their own questions. In just a few minutes, when we look at some micros, minis, and macros, you'll see an activity that's designed for helping students generate and develop their own questions. So hopefully that will be impactful for y'all. And then I see the key term of source again in the 1st grade key terms section. So if we have that calibration on what is a print and non-print source, what does that mean? What are examples? That would definitely help us in the instruction of research. All right, 2nd grade, my takeaways were asking and answering questions again, but adding in that area of narrowing and broadening your thinking and sequencing information. Grade 2, anything you have to add or share about this experience? That's okay, grade 2, but
I'm sorry.
Yes,
We started and the fire drill went off and I missed ours. I'm sorry.
Oh my God. Isn't that just like,
So I have nothing to add.
no, that's okay. Well, I was going to jump in and say, for the sequencing information, here's something that's super cool about the standards. If you look at AOR 6.1 for 2nd grade, it introduces the idea of telling something in order, okay, like sequencing your summary. Especially for that, I think it's like sub-indicator B for the central idea one. So that aligns with the expectations for research. How can we pair writing summaries and sequencing information when we do our research? Is there a way to draw a connection there? I just think that's super intentional on the part of the standards writing committee to have those expectations align. It just makes me feel like, yay, it does make sense, right? Okay, now let's take a look at 3rd grade. So my 3rd grade friends, my takeaways here, we're asking and answering questions to narrow and broadening thinking and grouping findings. Now that's different than sequencing our findings. Now we're looking at grouping things together that are similar. So 3rd grade, talk to me. What was your takeaway from the needs and guarantees? What I liked about your thinking tracker is that you also included, when you're talking about the key terms, you included print, non-print sources, but also is there a place to put in data in this research process? And we know with our new math standards, there is an exploration of data that's very focused at every grade level. So I think that's a great content area connection. That also plants a seed for me thinking about our next webinar when we talk about bundling indicators with cross content. Wonder how I could do that. So you've given me an idea. I'm excited for that experience next month. All right, 4th grade. Now here's where those indicators drastically change in language. We're conducting short research. We're generating a question about a topic, examining a provided source. We look at credibility, relevance, grouping related finding, and citing sources. All right, fourth grade. I know some of you in there are willing to unmute and talk to me. What were some of your findings from the needs and guarantees activity?
Well, we just talked about that we would have to spend a significant amount of time teaching students how to cite a source. Because until now, they've not had to do that.
Yes, Angie, that is a huge undertaking. So when you look at the research support document, while there are not indicator expectations for citing a source K through third grade, in the research support document, they do offer suggestions of how you might introduce that instructionally, very naturally in your instruction for K through 3. So again, it's not an indicator expectation, but could you infuse some of that language in your discussions with students? Or if a student has curiosity about it, could you include it? I think those are natural ways to go and do that. That sketch notes infographic at the very beginning articulates some of that information. So my K through 3 teachers, support our fourth grade with citing some sources as you can. All right, now let's take a look at fifth grade. Again, fifth grade language is very different from the K through 3 language. You're conducting short research, generating questions about a topic, consulting a variety of sources, the credibility and you explore credibility and use the most credible sources. We explore relevance, we group related findings, and we cite sources. A lot of expectations for fifth grade. Fifth grade, do you have anything to add from your needs and guarantees?
We just noticed that the jump from fourth to fifth seemed to be that in fourth, the source is provided, and that word provided is not there in fifth, and that addition of multimedia, so it's not necessarily all articles that they're reading.
Yes, Jennifer, you said exactly what I was hoping somebody would bring out. I'm so excited. Okay, so when we look at the language of the indicators, if you pull up the vertical progression, if you look at the language of the indicators, kindergarten through third grade, it uses the terminology print and non-print sources. Then in fourth grade, it changes to provided source. Now, the implications for that as a fourth grade teacher mean that I need to look before my grade level at kindergarten, first, second, and third grade, and know that my provided sources to my students need to include print and non-print. That's a big implication that we need to make sure our teachers understand and calibrate ourselves toward, because of the jump in fifth grade where we move to multimedia sources. Print and multimedia sources. So just having that slight discussion as a vertical group is essential to giving us a calibrated access to our research strand. I think that alone impacts instruction greatly. So, all right. Whew, y'all, that was some heavy lifting. A good 30 minutes on exploring those indicator expectations. Thank you for doing a deep dive into that. Now that we've done that, we're going to take a look at some instructional practices and collaboration and do a little collaboration to support instruction around research. So this is a slide we often use as we talk about instruction. It's important to remember that our instruction should align with the intent of our grade level indicators. This instruction helps us determine how we might then instruct our students, but then also formatively assess our students' learning. This process is iterative, and we may use formative assessment or feedback to determine which indicators need to be revisited or what we need to lean into more with our students and better to support all the students in our classrooms. So this alignment of grade level indicators, instruction, and formative assessment will guide our work through the next section. So let's take a look at a bundle. Now, this is a busy slide with a lot of information on it. So I'm going to give you a minute just to look at it. Okay. taking a look at this 2-column chart, you see 2 first grade indicators. I see the first grade indicator for informative writing, that's C 2.1, and that's on the left. On the right, I have the first grade indicator for research 1.1. Looking at the language of these 2 indicators, how do they connect or support one another? You can respond in your note catcher on box number 8, or you can drop it in the chat. What connections do you see in these 2 indicators? Your findings are so similar to mine. Yes, so the research gives them the information to generate the informational writing about, right? You got to know something to write something. And so by doing that research of asking and answering questions and exploring resources and refining your knowledge, obtaining and refining your knowledge, then you have that knowledge to go and produce an informational writing piece. Yeah, the questions during the research process are going to guide the writing. Oh, Tina, I love that. It provides an outline of information. So now let's take a look at an idea for instruction. Now, by no means is this the exemplar way to teach this. This is just an example that I've seen used in classrooms. So we all know about the first grade animal reports, right? But so often what we see in classrooms is that the questions are given to the students for conducting the research. What if we flip that idea and instead we just provided question stem? The first word for each question may be that they could then student generate questions about their animal. Then they could engage in the research process and find the information or answer to those student-generated questions. So what this might look like. Animal report, and the question we need to write about is who. What's a who question that a student could generate around an animal? Maybe, who is the animal I want to research? Who is the animal that lives in the rainforest and has red eyes? Okay, those are student-generated questions. When we think about what, it may be, what is this animal known for? What characteristics does this animal have? So the students are generating their own questions based on the question stem I give them, and then they are researching and coming up with their findings. Now, I loved, who said it again? I can't remember. Tina, you said now we can use this as the outline for their writing. So how could they take those findings and then produce their informative piece from it? Tracy Riley, you read my mind. Using the WH questions help to generate this informative piece of writing. This is just a very simple example of how you could bundle a research indicator and the C 2.1 indicator for first grade. All right, now let's take a look at another example. I'll give you just a minute to take a look at it. Here we're looking at a third grade indicator for C 7.1. This is an oral communication indicator. And we're comparing it to R 1.1 and R 1.2 for third grade. How did these 2 grade level indicators connect to and support one another? Go ahead and drop that in the chat or put it in box 8 of your note catcher. Amber, I love that. If students are expected to present information orally, they can use the research indicators to gather that information, right? And to find out what's actually important to present orally. They can develop that presentation based on those research skills. Yeah, so let's take a look at what that might look like in instruction. Oh, I love this, Christine. It says research can inform the report on a topic and non-print sources like a video presentation. I love that. Yes, it could be a model for oral reporting. I love that media literacy connection there. Okay, so let's take a look. This is one of my favorite activities, a wax museum. So if you're familiar with a wax museum, it's where a student adopts the historical figure and takes on their persona, right? They dress in that character's or that historical figure's manner, and they deliver a speech when prompted as that historical figure. So you may use something like this for your speech outline. You have the 3 questions: who am I, what am I known for, and what do I want to be remembered for? Now, this activity specifically, the one that I want to model for you, focuses in on the research. Let me look back. The research indicator on grouping findings. So we're really looking at R 1.2. So let's say that our student has already asked and answered questions and has a ton of information about the person that they've been researching. In this case, we're looking at Abraham Lincoln, and they're trying to develop an oral speech, okay, to deliver as Abraham Lincoln. Well, they need to be able to group all of the findings that they have gathered, and giving them an outline like this, a table in which to sort those pieces of information, can be really helpful in scaffolding them to being able to do that with proficiency. So, who am I? Obviously, Abe Lincoln goes there. The next finding that my student had was that he was the 16th president. So where would that information fall? You can argue for all 3 categories, right? I want to be remembered for being the 16th president. I want to be known for being the 16th president. But for my case, it makes more sense that it is helping to identify who he is. Next, what am I known for? I'm going to put ending slavery under that. Now, could I put it here as well for what I want to be remembered for? Certainly, but it's up to the student to grapple with how they want to group their findings. They are going through this process because that is the beginnings of synthesis, right? They're beginning to structure their research as they see fit. Let's take a look at a few more. What do I want to be remembered for? Leading the U.S. through the Civil War. Now, we know that he passed away right before the end of the Civil War, but hopefully that's what he wants to be remembered for. I think if I was Abraham Lincoln, I'd want to be remembered for that. But some other things, what am I known for? Well, I'm known for the Gettysburg Address and the Emancipation Proclamation. And who am I? Well, I have this other finding that I found in my research, was that I was from Kentucky. I don't want to be known for being from Kentucky, and I don't want to be remembered for being from Kentucky. So where does that finding fall? And who am I? So hopefully you can kind of see what it might look like to instruct around grouping findings in 3rd grade with a speech outline. All right, let's take a look at one more example. Take a look here. We're looking at an AOR 4.1 indicator for 4th grade and Research 1.2. How might these 2 indicators support one another? Oh, yes, purpose and perspective affect their credibility. Yes, I love that connection. Excellent, excellent job. All right, so let's take a look at what this might look like instructionally. In one of the 5 adopted high-quality instructional materials for South Carolina's ELA Elementary, we have this text called Trombone Shorty. Trombone Shorty. Now, this is a text written, and it is written by Troy Trombone Shorty Andrews. Okay, and it's an autobiography of sorts where they tell the story of how they became a famous trombone player. Okay, and so the author, we know his perspective is that he was a trombone player, learned to play trombone very early, and has had great success with playing the trombone. His purpose in writing this text is to encourage or persuade or inspire others to play the trombone or to play an instrument. So I know his perspective and I know his purpose, but let's think about, go back to our previous slide, take a look at how that might, how the information, his purpose and his perspective might help us to determine the credibility of him as a source. So is he credible to tell me about trombone playing? Is he credible to encourage young people to play the trombone? Does he have a story of success? Absolutely. Yes, we see him as a credible source because we know his perspective in writing this, but we also know the purpose behind it was a purpose that was informed by him being credible on the information. So I think this is a cool example of bundling an AOR and a research indicator together in a very creative way. Hopefully, Kim, I love your comment. He's also published by a publisher, not a website. How about that? That does lend itself to a little more credibility than others. That's a great point. All right, now let's take a look at a quote from our standards document. On page 20 of our standards document is one of my favorite quotes from the standards. It says that although the 2024 ELA standards are presented in 4 strands, the strands and the grade level indicators are not intended to be taught in isolation. Rather, they are designed to be grouped in clusters as determined by the educator, so students can read, write, and communicate while thinking critically and engaging with other students in an academic setting. This experience just now of going through all of those indicators and looking at how we can bundle them or teach them in a paired way is the business of teachers, right? We need to have teachers practicing this and exploring this and exercising this because that's the design of our ELA standards. So that brings us to a little bit of exploration time. If you've been in any of our previous sessions on written and oral communications, you have seen us present on the micro, mini, and macro structure. We know that micro experiences are less than 1 class period. Mini experiences are 1 to 2 class periods in length, and our macro experiences would be those culminating experiences that may be a week or weeks long. What we want you to do now is to explore some research resources. So on your note catcher, and I think Brenna's going to also drop it into the chat, you'll get a folder. And in the folder are some micro, mini, and macro research experiences. What we'd like for you to do for the next 5 to 10 minutes is just to explore those resources using the USA protocol. So what might you be able to immediately use from these ideas? What resource could you potentially share with a colleague or someone at your school or in your district? And then what resource could you adapt to align with your grade level instruction? Take a look at these resources and go ahead and respond on your note catcher. It is box number 9 for any that you might be able to use immediately, that you might want to share with a colleague or someone else, or something that you might adapt to support the instruction at your grade level. Go ahead and look through those resources. All right, as you are exploring those resources, if you will drop into the chat either your U, S, or A response to any of those resources. How could you use any of these? Are there any that you'd like to share with someone? Or is there a resource that you could adapt to best fit the grade or grade band that you support? Okay, I just want to read through some of your feedback in the chat. I love that you're seeing resources that are relevant to you. One thing I failed to mention is that in that resource folder, I also linked the master document for all of the micros, minis, and macros that we've produced so far on writing and oral communications, as well as research. So you have a ton of resources in there to explore. I see the mini trading cards unit. I think that's a great macro activity to do with your students. The what is in this picture, it definitely is a great question generating activity. Organizing the information using sentence strips, I think that that is essential too for students. And that's more of that evaluative experience with an indicator where they're not having to organize their information because that carries a heavy cognitive load, right? So generate some writing, then let's cut it apart and reorganize it. That's a lot for our young students. I love the sentence strip organization where you use a provided source and reorganize their writing. Awesome. The class encyclopedia. Oh, for 5th grade, wouldn't that be such a great connection to the huge amount of content you have in social studies, Jennifer? Woo! But 4th grade as well. The class encyclopedia would be relevant to you for social studies too. Y'all are covering such large spans of history that might be a great way to house all of that information. And it could be ongoing throughout the year. So I love that. All right. I see so many great takeaways. Thank you for engaging in this. I love the TED Talk too. It's one of my favorites. Awesome. I'm so glad you used the micros, minis, and macros. We were hopeful that endeavor was fruitful. So we're glad that y'all are finding it helpful. All right. Now it's going to be some time to go back into breakout rooms for just a few more minutes. And what we'd like for you to do, you'll be in your K through 5 groups again. I'm not sure if Brenna reshuffled or not, but the expectation for this will be to look on box 10 of your note catcher. In box 10, you have a link to a sample lesson. It's like a collaboration document. So in the collaboration document, you'll have 3 steps. The first step is to review the example of the lesson plan. So sometimes it's linked on that page, but sometimes it's just like on the last page in the collaboration document, but you'll look at it. And all of these are some type of research lesson from instructional materials. And so as you review that lesson, we want you to identify what skills and content are being addressed in that lesson. Do you see any connection to any indicators for research that you see embedded into that lesson? But I want you to take a good look at what are they expecting students to do. And then I want you to compare that to the grade level indicator. How does it align to the grade level indicator? Are there any areas where you might need to supplement or shift instruction so that the grade level indicator is met? Or is there a place where you could add in one of those micros, minis, or macros that we just explored in order to support instruction for that lesson? So this is a pretty hefty activity. Again, you're going to take a look at the collaboration document for the room that you go into. And we want you to take a look at the provided example of a research lesson from the high quality instructional material. Then you're going to explore what are the skills and content that are expected in this lesson. And then explore how it's aligned to your grade level indicator. And if it needs to be added to or subtracted from in some way in order to meet the expectations. Thank you all for coming back. We will debrief our experience. So I'd love for, how about 2 people or 2 groups to share out about your experience just now exploring these resources. So you can talk to me about the lesson that you read and how it aligns to the indicators. You can tell me about the micro, mini, and macro you decided to add to the document or to the activity. But I'd love for 2 people or 2 groups to share out.
Share.
Okay, I was gonna say okay.
Oh, we're in the same group. Okay, so we were 2nd grade, and so one of the things we kind of did is we looked at the lesson provided, and we spent a lot of time on step 3 because we found a lot of the micro, mini, and macro lessons. And then one thing we noticed is a lot that would say it would be for upper grade. We kind of talk how we can, make it, revise it so that it would fit our 2nd grade level. And there was just like it was just a lot of information to kind of digest, to put it into like how we can revise and how we would look at this entire research project. So we wish I had a little bit more time with our group because we was really starting to get into the flow of things, and then we kind of just got cut off. Yeah.
I love that. And what a valuable opportunity to get to talk to people from across the entire state who are engaging with these standards and hear what they're doing with them. So I love that you enjoyed that time in your breakout room. Oftentimes, I get super anxious about breakout rooms, so it always is encouraging to me to hear a success story.
Oh
So
yeah,
thank
once
you.
we got started and kind of started, throwing out ideas, like we were in the middle of saying something, and we came back to the main session. So, but it's okay.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And I love that you found value in adding even the upper grade micro minis and macros. Yes, so many of those can be adapted or altered to better fit for the younger grades. But that's the expertise that you all have, right? Of how you take a resource and you can adjust it and adapt it to best fit the needs of your students. That's, flexing those teacher muscles. So I love that. All right, one more experience with this integration activity.
We have first grade, and the indicator is ask and answer questions. So we picked the one where the National Geographic picture, where you ask and answer questions about the picture.
Oh, Angie, I love that one. Now, disclaimer, we have to be real careful sometimes with those National Geographic pictures, don't we?
Yeah.
Especially the
Some
ones
may
that
not be appropriate for first grade. Yeah.
I know that was one of the discussions. Casey Prince Harvey and I were building that that activity together, and she was like, "Mandy, I don't know. You need to put some kind of disclaimer on there, like
Yeah,
teacher.
we don't want to show up on the news." Yeah. No.
Exactly, Angie. You read my mind. But those pictures are often so intriguing and high interest for our students. And exploring those pictures builds background knowledge, and background knowledge is a huge indicator of reading comprehension. So, or a contributor to reading comprehension. So, the more we can do that in little ways, the better. I love it. And Christy,
too. I'm sorry for interrupting. We were talking about integrating science and social studies with our group. So pulling in pictures that support science and social studies content would not be a bad idea either.
yes, Angie. Yeah, and all you're doing is just giving them access to the information, right? If you can tease it a little bit in your science and social studies, then, or in your ELA, then when they get to the science and social studies, then you can do the heavy work of learning the content. So, I love that. Awesome. Okay, now that moves us to the end of our session together today, and we are going to do a little reflection on our entire time together. This is one of my favorite reflections, and it is triangle, circle, and square. For our triangle, in your note catcher box 11, I want you to write down 3 important takeaways from our session together today. For circle, I want you to write down what is still circling around in your head. What are you still trying to understand, or what are you still trying to make sense of relating to research at the elementary level? And then for square, what is something that was presented today or explored in your time in breakouts today that squares up or matches up with your thinking and values regarding research in our elementary students? Go ahead and reflect on your note catcher and drop one of your responses into the chat. Jenna, yes, I have thrown a lot of sources at you this morning, right? And so now it's going to be your time to enter that research process and hold on to what is relevant to you, but then also just to kind of put things in the spaces where they belong, right? Maybe some things aren't relevant, or maybe some things do inform your next steps. So I think that's a great way to look at it, is your circle. And Shana, I'm so excited that you love the micro and mini lessons. I think that those really do support classroom instruction and calibrating that instruction to the expectations of the indicator. Kelly, that's a great question. And more information for that can be found on the assessment specifications document. So if you are interested in that, Brenna can drop the link to the assessment quick links page where that information can be found. Also, you can reach out to Rebecca Runlet and Dima Abdu in our assessment development office for more information about how these standards can be assessed. All right, and Square, I'm glad that you feel matched up to some good ideas and resources that you can share, yes, immediately with your staff. Hopefully you see that. Good. All right, y'all. Well, our purpose today was to build our understanding on the content and rigor expectations of research. We did that through that needs and guarantees experience. And then we needed to develop and provide standards-based instruction using high-quality instructional material and evidence-based practices.